Well, hello, I'm Jamie Wardrop. I do a lot of different things. Started out in theatre, a lot of background in the theatre through acting, but now it veers into a lot of different things. A lot of projection, a lot of technical side of things, a lot of animation and design, and that can end up going in all sorts of directions. Every job I do doesn't seem to be the same, basically. It can veer off in quite creative directions. Although I'm not performing anymore, I sort of perform through my art, I guess, and I'm pretty happy with it. Managed to go to some exciting places.
So, what were you doing before lockdown?
Oh, what? Yeah, I was working with a VR company down in Cardiff. That was one thing that I was doing. We were exploring how we could use domes to create theatre experiences by putting projection, recording people with 3D cameras and placing them in the dome, and seeing if that could become, with a live actor also in the dome, a kind of interactive experience. So that was really interesting. There's a lot of digital media stuff going down in Cardiff, which I'd been aware about because of like Doctor Who and that kind of stuff. And the other thing that I was doing was in Germany with a Buto dancer. We went to this experimental, ecological minded festival in Germany, and we took the piece and did 2 nights there. So I was doing live visuals for that, things that I'd filmed. There was a lot of things about the ecological system of Scotland, so I'd filmed a lot of rivers and forests and kind of abstract stuff, and I mixed that live in the show with the dancer, and there's a live musician on stage. So that was really nice to tour. I guess around that time there was a sort of hint people over there were starting to get a bit worried about coronavirus, but it was kind of hard to believe still. Yeah, so I was kind of travelling about quite a lot just before lockdown, basically.
Okay. So, you mentioned that you heard a little bit of the COVID-19 about COVID-19. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I was working on another gig up in. I was supposed to go to Gran Canaria, which I did go to in the end, like 2 weeks before lockdown. I was doing another gig, and my friends were all frantically texting, going, "A hotel in Tenerife's been shut down." And because of the virus. I guess at that point I started to get the fear quite a bit. That was the kind of point I was like, oh God, right, this really is quite serious. Probably shouldn't have been travelling, to be honest with you. I'm quite concerned that we probably brought back coronavirus to the UK in some kind of way. And I was also teaching a little bit at that time, working with autistic young people, doing workshops, and yeah, that all got cancelled completely because they were just too vulnerable, really. In fact, I was kind of like saying to them, look, I don't think we should be continuing to work. I don't think anyone should be working at the moment. I guess I was kind of feeling it before, that it took so long for the government to step in, and I was kind of like, I think we should all be at home. And was sort of emailing the managers, sort of saying as such, like we shouldn't be here.
So, before the lockdown, what was your social life like?
Good, I'm a very social person. I live alone, but I live in the city centre of Glasgow, so, friends involved in club culture and the theatre, always going out to see them, doing different stuff. So that is completely halted, and I don't know how they're surviving now. But yeah, out a lot, I would say.
So, at the point of lockdown, what happened during that period, the initial lockdown?
I guess the kind of fear about the virus itself took over, and then a lot of trying to work out what that meant about work that was on the table for the next couple of months. No one was at home or in the workplace to answer invoice queries or emails, so there was a kind of funny point where it was like, okay, what's going to happen? This is before there was any backing of the self-employed. Yeah, kind of a lot of anxiety, kind of going, is this kind of work going to stand? Are they going to honour that contract? That took a long time to work out, but also your mind was, or my, I don't know about you, but my mind was kind of also trying to just kind of keep probably getting too obsessive about the news and reading too much scientific information, and so it was a really interesting time. And also just try to take care of myself, going out, cycling and going out and being out in nature to keep myself grounded. All that just took over. Something sort of survival kicked in, I think. Good or bad, I think I've paid for that afterwards because I was maybe on red alert for a long time.
So, you mentioned a little bit about your work life. Can you go into a bit more about how your work life changed?
Well, anything that did exist that I was doing kind of turned to online Zoom meetings. People that I was contracted or designing things for all kind of became an online conversation about shows that may or may, because it's theatre work, may or may not happen. There was a lot. I found that really hard because it was like, this show may happen in 6 months, it may happen in 12 months. And so much of what my process is about making something that happens to the deadline of a performance that involves going into rehearsals, being in a room with people, for that to just kind of then become all hypothetical and imagined for a show that maybe you haven't seen the actors do yet, or the dancer do yet, or the musician do. That became really hard. I didn't really know how to connect that up at first, because so much of it is about being responsive. But when you're kind of trying to imagine something that's going to sit on a hard drive for a year, it becomes really hard to motivate. I found it quite hard to motivate myself to do that work because I just couldn't picture it. So that was quite revealing, I guess, to me. It's like, what I do is really about being in a room with people, even though I maybe go home and make it at the computer and make it somewhere else at a different time. It doesn't mean anything until it comes back into the room with the performers or an audience.
So, how did your daily life change during the initial lockdown period?
Time just seemed to sort of become quite elastic. Things slowing up and speeding down, and it just any kind of work pattern just seemed to go out of the window. I know that for some people, I was very good. I was able to do something creative for myself, not for anyone else every day, but I found it really hard to keep to other people's schedules and wants for me. And some people really, really understanding about that. And other people were like, no, I think you should be working harder because now you've got lots of free time. So, I just had to follow whatever happened every day. I just had to wake up with whatever seemed important. And to be honest with you, a lot of the time that meant kind of just getting out of the house, being outside, because I know that keeps me sane. So I kind of made that the priority, really. And I don't regret that. I think that was the right thing to do. I think there was a lot of confusing, kind of like conflicting messages coming through what other, your peers are doing and what the news is telling you to do, but it's all ultimately a bit useless. You have to do what you need to do when you wake up in that situation, I think.
So how did your social connections change during that period? You'd mentioned that some of them you'd lost contact with.
Yeah, and I still haven't seen a lot of those people face to face since, because a lot of my extended community peer group happens through going to events and stuff, so I've just not seen those people at all. I've seen my kind of family and my core group of friends, but there's just a huge kind of circle of people. I've no idea how they're doing.
How do you feel about that lockdown period now?
Ooh, that is a good question. For me, I kind of feel it's a bit of it was going to happen. The feeling at the time was this was going to happen at some point. Maybe not through a coronavirus, but through some other crisis I feel like the way that we've been behaving through climate and the way that we've been, you know, behaving economically, at some point the system was going to break in some kind of way or another. So it was kind of like, oh, right, it's come now. This is where the kind of disruption has been placed. So I didn't expect it to come from that route, I guess. So I kind of had to, yeah, I did kind of was like, all right, okay, this is the time when this kind of breakage happens in our society. I do think, you know, actually pandemics happen in a cycle every so often. It's just not something we've had to deal with in recent memory, but it has fallen in this time. At a time when there's some not very nice people in control in the bigger architecture of like the UK and the world, unfortunately. So there's not really been leadership there to get us out of it. But yeah, it's kind of I think it's had to make us evaluate what's around us again and what kind of resilience we have as just ordinary people. So I think it's been, I'm trying to find the positives. I found the summer part of lockdown quite hard when things were opening up again, and there was definitely a lot of fear about going back to work or going to meet people. And I've been working away outside of Glasgow. Coming back to the city again, I can feel that kind of block of anxiety. It's just sort of sitting fat there in the middle a wee bit and having to deal with that again. But I think that's what we're all having to go through, isn't it? It's definitely this kind of ever-present thing of am I going to catch it? Am I going to spread it? Is it going to knock out my livelihood again? I actually had a period of illness before lockdown last autumn, this time last year, where I did something to my back. So I had already spent sort of 7-8 weeks trapped in the house. I guess that kind of did prepare me mentally a wee bit for what was to become. But I don't think, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do lockdown. It seems to be a constantly sort of shifting animal, really. And what maybe worked last week to get you through maybe won't work the following, you know?
So now that initial lockdown period has ended and we're in this, I suppose, is it a stage 3 lockdown, how's your work life changed?
I think after initial panic, the people that are getting in contact with me and what I'm trying to think about is, you know, creative ways around it now. Can't be static and stagnant forever. I've realised a lot of my nature is constantly pushing. That I'm kind of dealing with creative ideas and creative problems is kind of what feeds me mentally and keeps me mentally well. And it's just who I am. So I guess now we're getting to this stage. I think, although it's not going to be easy still, I think with other people, I'm noticing other people, we're trying to find ways to actually keep going through this, trying to be, you know, find the gaps, like the kind of weeds growing up through the cracks in the pavement. We're like, basically people like us can't be kept down because we're annoying. We just keep finding ways to get through. And yeah, we have to not exhaust ourselves doing that. I think we probably will do that a little bit. We do that anyway at the best of times because we can't be kept down. But I think we are finding little channels and routes through. I guess the worry is so much of it, like a lot of the creative side of things, a lot of it involves on the taps being open from government, and I think there is a kind of underlying fear, those taps will need to be turned off probably at some point because the economy is going to crash. And then does that mean everything's going to dry up? But that's in the future. Right now, the taps are still open, and because money was promised in previous times, that spending still exists, so that kind of keeps part of my profession going. I do feel very lucky and privileged. I do the kind of events-based stuff, conferences and gigs, but I guess I've always had many strings to my bow, so maybe the theatre side of things and the subsidised arts sector side is quite privileged in some extent, because that money is government money, while a lot of private events There is no subsidy for it. It is commercial. I think the commercial side is really in trouble. And I haven't certainly done any of that kind of stuff. It's all come from the more subsidised side, which is guaranteed cash, do you know?
Yeah. So, how's your social life changed now that we're in this semi-lockdown stage 3 thing?
Complicated, because you don't know, what the rules are that particular week, and they can change the day before, and maybe you haven't heard because you're maybe trying to avoid the news and you haven't read the fine print. I mean, last night I sat and had a bonfire with people in their front garden, which is accessible to the street. That I'm not really sure if that was legal or not, but we were all socially distanced, sitting around a fire. For me, that's crucial because I've not seen pals. I've been working outside of the city, so if I don't see friends a little bit, I know I'm going to go mad. But I know there's a lot of friends that just have retreated and don't want to meet. They're too scared. They're not going to want to. They're not going to want to meet in a park after work now. It's going into the winter months. They're not going to want to sit in a dark park to meet me, so I've no idea how the next step's going to go. And I hear that the coffee shops are like overwhelmed with folk because they are the only social spaces left. It's made me think a lot about the lack of like food-based or alcohol-based social spaces that we have. They just don't seem to exist. We've been completely lacking and forgotten about them. I think other cultures do it better. I think in Scotland we lack imagination sometimes, and that's getting a bit frustrating.
So how do you see everything progressing? Do you have any ideas of how we should progress from here?
Well, for me, my politics tells me that you should just there should be some universal basic income is banded around and talked about a lot, and maybe that's not the best way, but I think there's just too many vulnerable people around, too many people that are going to get in trouble. Like for me, that would, I think all other discussion is pointless unless you take some of the fear out of living for people. They need to know that they're going to be fed and have a house. And I think to guarantee that for that group of society is it shouldn't be too much to ask, really, for the next wee while. I think just it's really horrible. It's kind of like a form of torture and abuse, to be honest with you, that people are having to worry about that at the moment. I just don't think it's acceptable, and I do think we need to get out there. And I know we're not allowed to protest and gather. I think we're going to have to say enough is enough. I don't see how people have been pushed enough over the past few years. So, yeah, I think it's probably time to get angry again because we've had a lot to deal with, but we need to get out there and I know people are doing that in sector by sector, industry kind of way. But I think we need to be more universal in that and say, actually, this needs to cover a whole group of people, because there's people that are, we know this, we know statistically that richer people are not suffering as badly from this. They're not catching the disease as much, and they're surviving just fine in many ways, and their mental health is better. So they're okay. It's everyone else. Basically, if we have to just look out for each other again. Because it's just going to be the damage and pain that is going to cause to everyone else if we just give up on that. It's just the repairing that will take later just doesn't seem worth it to me. If everyone else is taken care of and looked after, then there's actually a chance that we can sort of salvage something from this. Is what I'm thinking at the moment.